Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today, reading through the news sites, and I came across a story about Sabu refusing to retire from pro wrestling after doctors instructed him to. Basically, the story is that Sabu met with doctors who went over and sort of looked over his body and said that he had suffered 2 broken bones in his shoulder, and basically said that, basically for Sabu, it was time to hang it up. Sabu has been through a lot of wars. I mean, he's one of those guys that really gave up his body to the business. The scars that are, all over his forehead, his abdomen, all over his body, his legs. Basically he's the guy who's gone through just about every table at every professional wrestling show all around the country. It's a sad thing to see that, Sabu was the guy that was doing this, wrestling for ECW. With Paul Heyman, he was one of those guys that drank the Kool-Aid and, would show up to work. He was one of the guys that did stand up to Paul. Everybody knows the story about Sabu double booking himself for one of the big ECW shows, and Paul went out to the ring and told everybody that Sabu lied to him. He lied to the people. When Paul Heyman would come out to the ring for promos, he basically shot straight with the crowd. Unless he was building up to an angle, if he went out there and he told the crowd something about a wrestler not appearing at a show, that was the reason why they weren't there. And Paul and Sabu finally made up, and they were able to sort of come back together and work together. And then in the dying days of ECW, which was also the dying days of WCW reached out and actually signed Sabu to a contract. During this, Paul Heyman thought that he had Sabu signed under contract, so he filed a court juncture against Sabu, and Sabu basically wasn't able to get the WCW deal. He tried to get it. Kevin Sullivan said you have to sign the contract now. He wanted to take it home and look it over. Basically, by the time he took it home and looked it over, called Sullivan, told him he was signing the contract. Sullivan said that the WCW people didn't want to go through a lawsuit with ECW and just said, we can't take you. And that was basically it for Sabu working for Paul Heyman. Sabu did get a run in WWE, which I would believe is probably the best money that he's ever made. But then again, if you can remember and you're watching the old Nitros from back in the day, they really hyped up that they were bringing in Sabu from ECW to wrestle in WCW. They were trying to sign him to a contract, but he was only looking to make a payday. He wrestled those shows on Nitro for $500 cash. He told the story on the Chris Jericho podcast, basically saying that he wasn't looking to sign any kind of a deal. He's one of those guys that basically, I bet, spent all of his money, on this, that, or the other, and didn't save any of it. So he's going to be trouble looking into the future. He's one of those guys that you always see at all of the, the wrestling conventions, and you're probably going to see him for a long time to come. But Sabu flew to Europe to work independent dates, and he's going to be working with his broken bones in his shoulder.